So the more processes you can put in place, the better. So I brought in an advisor that actually implemented a complete project management office in my company, and every PMP certified project manager, it goes through that process. And they have to follow the same, they have to use the same forms, they have to report on the same project management reporting metrics, use the same dashboard, use the same balanced scorecard to make sure our projects are healthy. It's completely standardized across our company. And so finding people that will help you build the infrastructure that will match your business development is tricky, but it's really important because there's a lot of great companies out there that have great websites, but it's like a car. They look beautiful on the outside, and then when you open up the hood, it's a mouse running on a wheel, keeping things going, and that is not sustainable. So how do you build a strong infrastructure that will match your business development activity and ultimately your growth goals?
Let me ask just one question and we'll let you answer. How many of you all consider your businesses to be hero-centric? That is really fundamentally about one or two people? Yeah, we're like that. And we, this is a brilliant point. Hero-centric versus process-centric. So if you haven't thought about that, I would encourage you to do so. Pete?
I was going to say, you asked some great questions about the audience earlier. Maybe we can get a show of hands from the small business owners and business owners that are here. How many of you guys actually have an advisory board in place now?
So I'm counting about 3.
What was the question again?
How many of the companies represented here actually have an advisory board currently in place?
A formal advisory board?
Formal advisory board.
2 people raised their hand.
Okay.
Well, what's your wife, Michael?
Yeah,
that is a formal board. I think everybody up here has said, listen, we live in a digital age where people are, when they are looking to do business with you, they are going on LinkedIn to check you out. They are going to your website. And you want to be portrayed as the most professional organization out there. So when they're going there, I can tell you they are looking at who are the connections that you currently have. Who's on your advisory board? Who's on your board of directors? If I do business with this company, will I potentially have access to those other individuals? So as you're looking at it and building it, you have to remember that other individuals are out there looking at what you are portraying yourself to be. And the more professional that you can look, the better your advisory board, the better your board of directors. We're not going to get into the board of directors, but the more influential those individuals are, the more professional you're going to be portrayed. And when other companies come and look at it, they're going to go, all right, this is an organization that I want to do business with, not only because they fill maybe a gap in what we're trying to accomplish, but they also have individuals that I may be able to leverage. So I would tell you that obviously a majority of people don't have a formal advisory board. I would tell you that is something that is essential as you are looking to grow your business.
And that really ties us into the next question that we wanted to get to. Before I ask that, I want to ask the audience, how many of you do business with the government or are trying to do business with the government? So about 3/4 of us. Okay, so from a government perspective, and I'll start this with you, Jose. From a government perspective, what are the pros and cons of having an advisory board, and specifically the risks, the cons, the negatives? What are the things that you see where having an advisory board could be a risk factor for, or perhaps who is on your advisory board that could be a risk factor?
I don't see any major risks with having an advisory board. I think from a government perspective, the biggest fundamental weakness, I meet with thousands of companies over the last couple of years, and they all talk about their, and the first question I ask them is, what is your strategy for targeting government work? Well, I used to work at some agency and I have a number of contacts and I just keep having them introduce me to different people. And how much have you grown over the last few years? No small business that I ever meet with that just started ever says, we decided to focus in on a tri-state area, Maryland, Virginia, and DC. We got a listing of all the opportunities that will be competed in that area over the next 3 years. Then we went ahead and we did FOIA requests on the opportunities that we think we could target. After that, we identified people within those agencies that may have some knowledge of, and you know why I said FOIA request, because it's an existing contract, maybe recompete, where you can gather information even though it's blacked out, you have a general idea of what happened. Then I've identified somebody within that federal agency that I can actually reach out to, and I can target and work with to target that specific opportunity to find out information. And probably 70% of the time, not one company mentions anything like that in their plan. They're literally calling around, getting introductions, and introducing themselves. And if you don't have an overall strategy, how are you going to actually succeed? Especially as a small business when you have limited time. So I think what I would say is, I don't see a fundamental weakness to having someone advise you. And just make sure that what they're telling you about is specific challenges that you're going to face, and they're giving you ideas on how to address those challenges. Because opening a door to a number of different people within government isn't going to help you grow your business. But having a strategy to fundamentally, and then remember, you're a small company. You're maybe not ready to put in the infrastructure, but having a strategy where 4 years out you can target a range of opportunities, and there are ways you can do that. And then you can work towards those opportunities, so you're spending your time on the most promising opportunities in a tri-state area where you're not reaching out all over the place is what's going to almost guarantee you more success than just networking. And I think when you're looking for an advisory board, make sure someone identifies the challenges that you're going to face.
Ralph, your perspective also from the government?
I think to Jose's point, Jose was all over. I think it's all about gathering the information early, and getting exactly the right information. One of the things you have to do, whether you have an advisory board or not, and this is something that our counsel companies on all the time, is the smaller you are, the further back in the acquisition life cycle you have to go. You have got to get involved early. You have got to get involved early. I'm going to say it one more time. You've got to get involved early. Okay? Time is very, very important to you in terms of trying to find out exactly what that opportunity is all about. Like Jose said, FOIA in it, looking at the forecast, meeting with a couple of key people within that agency. I tell folks all the time, another thing, you cannot go in and have one meeting with me, walk into SBA, have one meeting with me. You didn't even think about asking for a meeting with Melissa. Why not? It's hard enough to get in the building in the first place. So what I say is, come in, establish a plan in terms of what you want to do. Can I take a quick commercial break for a second? Okay. Next month, there's going to be a procurement conference in downtown, small business procurement conference at the convention center. Okay. That is a place where you can almost start mapping out your strategy on how you're going to hit some of these agencies. Okay. Businesses need to know. We're going to go to DHS and try to see what we can do. Okay, I've met DHS. Now I got to drill down and find out what's going on in each one of their offices. And when I find out what's going on in each one of their offices, there's groups within those offices. So you can't be, to Jose's point, you can't be everywhere. Okay, you got to say DC, DHS, FEMA. You just don't have to. You don't have the bandwidth. So the advisory board is good from the standpoint of these people are coming from someplace probably that you're not. Okay? They're coming from an agency that maybe you're not, relationships that you don't have, and they can kind of open that door for you. Now, once the door is open, you got to walk the walk and talk the talk. Okay? But the main thing that I want everybody to understand is you got to get involved early, and like Jose said, you have to have a very structured approach on what you're going to do. You don't have a very structured approach, I would suggest leaving that opportunity alone, because her company does, and they're just going to wear you out over the lifetime of this process. And it costs too much money, it costs too much time for you to be tiptoeing into this thing. Okay, so if you're going to get involved the right way, targeted with connections that will allow you to leverage everything you want to do in terms of growing your business. It's true. It's got to be a strategy kind of approach.
Can I share a personal
Let me
success
just hold
story?
up 1 second before you do.
Sure.
As we're going to start collecting the question cards, and so if you haven't written out a question already and you have one, please do so, and Dee Dee and Ryan will walk around and collect those.
Jose, I'm so glad you brought up the FOIA, because this is a success story that will show you that it's worth doing, okay? So 10 years ago, we won a contract with Office of Personnel Management, the Training Management and Assistance and Human Capital Training contracts. There's two arms to this vehicle, the TMA vehicle, training and human capital. We're a prime on both. My firm is going to be 20 years old. When I started the firm, my master's is in education and training, and that's just always kind of been what my passion is. And when we got into government, I knew about the TMA vehicle. I knew there was just no way that I was ready for it. I had no past performance, I had no infrastructure, my name wasn't known, I was a beginner. So what I did was, I paid attention to all the activity on the vehicle. I developed relationships with all the primes on there, and I went to all of them, and I became a sub to a lot of those contractors that were on there. And they only saw me as like this independent startup. I mean, they didn't really see me as a threat. But my strategy was, I wanted to learn everything there was about this vehicle. I got to know the project managers. I got to know Jen Sedian, who at the time was the branch chief. Remember Jen? And I did exactly what you said. I FOIA'd the contracts for OPM TMA, because this is like a 30-year vehicle, and I got to know every single thing there was to know about that contract. And then I waited. And then it came up for recompete, and guess what? I still wasn't ready. I didn't have the past performance. I didn't have the infrastructure. I didn't have the money to go after this. So I waited another 5 years. So then it came up for recompete again, and I was finally ready, because I had spent 3 years basically training my team, who I finally had, on this vehicle. And I knew every project manager. I knew Jim Smith, who was the business development person, Jen Sedian. I knew all the program managers. I knew the contractors who were on there. I knew the services they were looking for. And we had saved $300,000 to go after this vehicle. Like, that's how much it cost us. That's how much we risked in our company to go after this vehicle. And we had just moved, and I had no furniture in my house. Because when you're the business owner, it's all the same money. And we literally put everything we had into going after this vehicle, but that was after waiting 8 years. And guess what? We won, and it transformed my whole company. And that's what happens when you plan, and you strategize, and you FOIA. You learn everything you can, but there has to be a strategy behind it. And it literally has changed our company. So he was not just throwing that word out there. FOIA, FOIA, FOIA. Information is out there. Use it to your advantage and plan around it.
You'll hear me say a couple things multiple times, but I want to highlight something she said. I keep saying, find somebody that's going to focus you on challenges that you're going to face. And if you've listened to Marissa, she's named 3 things multiple times. You have to have infrastructure, right? Has she said that? You got to have infrastructure. You got to make sure you have an ability to have past performance. You have to have an overall strategy how you're going to actually get to that end point. So if you walk away with anything, it's that if I'm going to go out and get an advisory board, I want to address those, and financing, right? I'm going to think about those 3 things and people that can help me in those 3 or 4 areas, because that's the difference between a contract here and there and getting by and building an actual enterprise that's going to last 20 years.
Now let's shift a little bit to think, and now that we've started to build a business, what is our exit strategy? Do we have an exit strategy? Are we thinking about either selling the company or how we exit out? And if we are, we should be thinking about how we create value in a company. So, Pete, this is your kind of realm, and what I'd like to ask is, from a valuation perspective, what does an advisory board do on the positives and perhaps negative side? And if you're involved in helping a business owner exit a company, is there, what are the positives and negatives to having an advisory board?
So I would say that I've never really seen a negative as it relates to an advisory board, but I believe if you have a formal advisory board in place, it shows potentially, obviously I look at this from a different perspective. I'm assuming that most business owners don't want to run their business until they hit their grave. They at some point want to create some liquidity so that they can retire. So that's the perspective that I come from, is how do I build that business? Marissa talked about it. You really want to have a niche market. That's what's going to create value from that standpoint, is knowing your knitting, knowing what you're good at, and filling a gap in the market that somebody who essentially wants to acquire you will come in and see value in that space as well. I've never seen an issue with having an advisory board. I believe that it shows that you have the disciplines and structures in place to fit into another organization. So it shows that you've done due diligence, you've brought in, as everyone up here said, you've brought in the right people, you've brought in operational individuals, you've brought in individuals that can help you land business within the certain niche markets that you're looking at. So in my opinion, I don't really see a disadvantage to having an advisory board, or even at some point having a board of directors, because I do believe that it shows potentially the acquiring company, we've got all the disciplines and structures in place to make this a worthwhile acquisition for you.
Just one quick point on that. Let's think about this from a small business perspective. If you're a small company and you're a 8A or a woman-owned small company, that's your competitive advantage, right? And if you do a good job, at some point you're not going to be a small company anymore. So I go back to the challenge, understanding your challenges and the things that Marissa keeps highlighting. At some point when you're not a small business, your exit strategy is either address those challenges, partner with somebody so that you can grow from the average of $14 million in annual revenue somewhere to 30, or it's to find a way to actually sell your company to somebody else who can use the infrastructure that you've created, the process that you put in place, so that it benefits a larger entity that they may have. So you have to kind of think about it in terms of, as you're growing, you're not going to have this competitive advantage for much longer than X period of time if you're successful. And if you're not planning for that exit in terms of infrastructure, past performance, establishing financing, what am I going to do? Enter into a joint venture so that I can compete on much larger contracts, leveraging someone else's capability, or I'm going to exit and sell the company that I have based on existing contracts that are in place. Because in the last 2 years, of those contracts, your company's not as valuable as it is in the first couple of years. And those are the challenges and things you have to think about